Lord also used it to affect people who aren't even here.
That's right.
People that either couldn't get here, or people that chose other classes, and that you'll use this to really promote things that help people, marriages, and everything. We love you so much. Thank you for Jesus. We pray in His holy name.
Amen. Thank you, bro. So you can imagine that the H is a silent H. Yeah.
All right, so I pronounced it wrong, correct?
No problem.
Okay.
All right.
Do you have an extra seat?
I should have everybody move up. Okay.
Is he ready? Good morning. We're excited that you're here today, and we're going to share a couple things about a program that we're excited about that we want to help you understand in a greater and greater way. My name is Mike Fix. This is my wife, Laura. And in 2007, we attended a conference in Los Angeles, California. There was, on the women's program, a class taught by Karen Louie entitled Movie Therapy. I have studied psychology at university, and I thought movie therapy was the stupidest thing I'd ever heard of.
Well, I love the class, and the thing that I remember about it is she did a movie clip from last holiday with Queen Latifah, and she talked about no regrets. And literally, I can remember this class so well because of this movie clip and the things that Karen shared, and it had a great impact on me for later on.
Fast forward to 2009, we go to another conference in Denver, Colorado, and on the program is a class being taught by John and Karen Louie on movie therapy. And so I decided to go to this class to check it out with Laura. We sit in the class. It's about 2 hours long. After the class, we do other things at the conference. And then as we're walking back to the hotel, we're reminiscing about the various classes. We get into the hotel room, start talking about the movie therapy class, and my wife starts crying.
What really impacted me was another movie clip. And it was a movie clip from the movie called The Last King of Scotland. And the scene was parents having this special dinner for their son who had just graduated from medical school. And they were so proud of him. And they did this toast. And the father said to his son, "We're so proud of you for your accomplishment and for, the degree that you've gotten. Not as good as mine, but a good one nonetheless." And then he did the toast. That resonated so much with me because that's my relationship with my father. I never felt like I was good enough. And I wanted so much to have the connection with my father and to feel like we were close and that I was accepted by him. And that class, with what was shared, I remember with Mike, because I was just weeping. And I said, this is something we need to look into and do for ourselves and to train, because this is where people are at and what they feel and how to help people heal from these things.
So it clicked for me, and I thought, this is perfect for Laura. This will help her so much in her life. And so in January of 2010, I signed up to be part of the first training session for John and Karen in movie therapy. I went to Los Angeles, California. I sat in the class, and after the first hour, I realized this really wasn't just for Laura, it was for me too. And God used that time to help me discover things about my life that I had not really put together. And it was exciting. And since that time, we've been doing I Choose Us and Good Enough Parenting for groups of 400 all the way down to 2. using it in engagement counseling, using it in one-on-one counseling, using it in small groups, small group leaders, training them and so forth. And it's been a phenomenal thing that has changed our lives. I would say we had one regret, and the regret was that we wish we had the program about 20 years ago. Amen. See, we've been married for 28 years and grateful for what all that God has done for us in our lives. But our hope today is that you will take some of the things we talk about back with you so that you won't look back and say, I wish I had this 20 years ago. You'll be able to look forward and say, thank God I have these tools today to be able to help myself to grow and become aware of things, as well as to help other people in the future. Now we have before you, you'll see a large group of teachers to share with you today. We're not going to have a class format. It's going to be more of we're going to share some experiences we've had and then open it up for an opportunity for you to ask us questions. If you don't have questions, I wrote up a whole list of questions that you might want to know the answers to, but we're really hoping that you would engage us because we're here. We have representatives from churches the size of 50, 200, 1,000, and 3,000. And so I'm going to let them introduce themselves to you and share about their experience utilizing Good Enough Parenting and I Choose Us in their churches as well as other churches around the U.S. and around the globe. So first we're going to have Randy and Bev Jenka from the great city of Annapolis, Maryland, which is in the U.S.
Why don't you go first?
Okay. My name's Beverly Jenka, and kind of similar to the Fixes, we got into this program. We've done marriage dynamics and had some other programs we've been a part of, but this really caught our eye when we were at ILC in Denver, and we just thought, wow, this sounds like an amazing program because, you know, you've heard a picture's worth 1,000 words. A moving picture, a moving picture's worth many more. And so you can just see things in a movie that you can't explain, you know, it take a lot longer to explain. And so anyway, we jumped into this program, and my husband and I both come from very dysfunctional backgrounds. We've been married 28 years and just have had a lot of growing and maturing emotionally to do. You know, the Holy Spirit is amazing, and God's church is so incredible. And, you know, I think only by the grace of God did we stay married all those years, with both of us coming from divorced families with a lot of just issues going on. And so I'm so grateful that we've had brothers and sisters give us input and counseling through our lives. Miraculously, at a very young age, we were, you know, kind of thrust into leadership roles. And actually we're shepherding couples and discipling marriages like years and years ago, and I'm thinking, what in the world? Why were we put in that position? And you know, we had lived in Boston for probably 10 years, moved to Atlanta, and I realized, wow, there's a lot of stuff going on for me that I need to work on. And I was very shut down emotionally, kind of robotic. I didn't understand what submission was, and so I you know, understood a lot of concepts in the Bible. And I wanted to be a great wife and be obedient, but there's a lot of things that were missing as far as our connection and intimacy and emotional connection. So what I just want to share briefly about Good Enough Parenting and I Choose Us, what I love is just, it gives you tools. It gives you a language that you may not have yet to be able to kind of explore what's going on for you, what's going on for your in your marriages, what's going on with your brothers and sisters. And it really helps to kind of break down and categorize the core needs that we all have, to understand what those are, and to be able to speak a language. And you can kind of come into a situation and very quickly understand and have compassion for, wow, this person growing up didn't have a parent that was really there to meet their emotional needs. You know, this just, and it just, to me, it just brings about a great sense of mercy and compassion for people. Instead of, sometimes we can feel annoyed, you know, it can trigger stuff for us. And, you know, I think that getting a new set of tools so where you can talk to somebody and say, wow, you sounds like you've had a really challenging upbringing. Let me relate to you. Let me be vulnerable, share my stuff with you. Let's get close. Let's connect. Let's talk about how we can heal together.
Well, like Beth said, that we come from very dysfunctional families. I mean, it's not appropriate to go into details here, nor do we have the time. But it's amazing when you become a disciple, your sinful nature is crucified and you're baptized, you're given the Holy Spirit. but your stuff gets baptized too. That's the problem.
Yeah.
And you quit all the gross outward stuff. And a couple, I look at Ephesians 4, I look at Colossians 3, and Paul says, put off that sinful life, put on the godly life. But he never tells us how. Okay? And how many of you guys have been disciples more than a few years? That's what I thought. So you're done dealing with all the easy stuff, right?
Yeah.
The only stuff left is all the hard stuff that's deep down in your heart. Okay? And so, well, yeah, like Bev was saying, we're in Atlanta, and here's the thing. What can happen so often in the kingdom, we were leading Bible talks, house churches. We were on the Munich team. We were supposed to go to Munich to plant that church. And we were leading a house church in Northern Virginia that's bigger than the Annapolis planting we're in now. Okay, we're the token non-full-timers here, by the way. Okay, I have a day job. I'm a systems engineer. Bev's a nutritional therapy practitioner. But the things we have learned in recent years, we're like Mike and Laura. Where was this 20, 30 years ago when we got married, when we started our family? You know, but again, by the grace of God in the kingdom, we have an amazing family that can help us grow. And this is something that has come to us recently. And I just thank God for what John and Karen have developed and are generously sharing throughout the world.
Amen.
And so we've done I Choose Us for in the Northern Virginia church. That's where we were for 10 years before we went to Annapolis recently. We've done it as a marriage retreat, and then all the singles babysat for the marrieds during that. And so when we got done with that and all the marrieds are talking about it, they're going, well, what about us? So we created Why Do I Behave the Way I Do? We did that for our singles, and it was done in Northern Virginia. We kept picking up singles from Baltimore and D.C. and Potomac Valley, and it was a huge turnout for that. We did a couple of talks in Colorado Springs right before we were transferred to Maryland. Right now we're wrapping up our first Good Enough Parenting that we're doing together with Darren and A.T. Ford, the couple that leads there. And the thing that we love about this is you get to deal with your stuff. Okay, it's one thing to tell, bro, you need to repent. Okay, I'll stop it on the outside. And we think very highly of marriage dynamics for that reason. There's a lot of things you can learn and change in the mechanics. But at the end of the day, we need to deal with the hurts that are still down there that need to be healed in order to experience that kind of transformation that Paul talks about in Romans 7. All the hard stuff, and then we end up with a success in Romans 8. So we're currently in a congregation now that's about 40 people. We're empty nesters. We're excited about going to help out with the planning. And now we're going to hand it over to the bigger folks.
Good morning, guys. My name is Phua Hee, and I'm from the Singapore church. Right now, I lead the singles ministry in the Singapore church. Maybe you saw me the other day. I was wearing a skirt at the musical. That's not a fruit of GEP or ICU, okay? Anyway, the great thing about what we've been learning about GEP is that it isn't just a program that benefits the parents. The amazing thing about it is we've been able to transport it, and it's been able to benefit all facets of our church of 1,100 members. In Singapore, we've been teaching GEP since 2011. Now, the disadvantages of challenges of being in a large and diverse church are, firstly, one single workshop can't meet everyone's needs. In a church that big and so diverse, you can't do that. And secondly, people are slow to adopt what we teach into their own parenting. You teach it once, and people are like waiting and seeing, how many people are actually changing, and so it takes a while to change that in the church of this size. Now, the great thing is, because of these challenges, is that we can do it every year. We can tweak it, do it different ways, segment it, and we've been able to invite continual lots and lots of visitors and friends every year. And number two, the Christians in the church, they hear the same basic message of core emotional needs, limited reparenting in different angles, and it slowly started to sink in. So, for example, last year, we did GEP in a different way. We did it in a way that was just targeted towards fathers. And we entitled it such as the power of active fatherhood. So there are two sessions, the power of play and the power of engaging. So that's what we did last year. This year, we split Good Enough Parenting into two series, each 6 sessions each. So the first series was for parents of children 10 years of age and above. So the theme for that, we emphasize a lot more on the connection between the parents and the kids and having healthy autonomy, not being so over-controlling. What we did, we included a session on repair and reconnection between parents and kids. So we first got the parents to one side, and on one night we talked to them about the need to take input from your kids. Be humble. When your kid gives you input, don't start to clamp down on them. And we did it together with the youth workers. The next night we got the youth to one side and we talked to them about the importance of being vulnerable. You need to be courageous to give feedback to your parents. Then the next night we got them all together and we split them into their little families. So you'd have chairs where it was a mother, father, the teenage son, the youth worker sitting to one side, and it was amazing just seeing the child just express the different hurts they've been feeling, and seeing these parent disciples. You could see how humble they're trying to be. And in many cases, there are lots of crying, lots of tears. In some cases, it was starting to spiral out of control. So we had staff available to jump in and help the repair to be a great success. So one thing that was amazing, we had visitors coming in. And they were sitting in, just seeing how Christianity, this parenting principle, wasn't just a theory. They could see biblical parenting being put into practice in real, sinful, messed up families. So it was really, really moving for the visitors. So that was the first series we did. The second series we did was for parents of children. Their children are 10 years and below. So the emphasis was more on reasonable limits and on the necessity of playing with your kids. Singapore, we don't do enough play. So it was a great time. The benefit of teaching a more age-specific group was that we can get really detailed about the expectations of parenting. One brother that I'm close to, we have kids around the same age. They're about 6-7 years old. So he was saying before this year, he thought his parenting was already good enough. But when we got really specific, then he realized he knows very clearly and practically what he needs to do to change his parenting with his two sons now. 3 months ago, we taught good enough parenting for the singles. So how do you talk about parenting with the singles? Well, we taught the same concepts of core emotional needs, of limited reparenting. So why do I behave the way I do? It's good for the singles because they're now aware of all the issues. We did that last year, and after that, people are like, I know I messed up, so how do I change now, right? How do I cure my schemas? So the great thing is when we did good enough parenting for the singles, we entitled it Singles Redefine. What we realize is all these singles, they come from dysfunctional families like all of us, and they bring the same dysfunctions into their Bible talk. And so in a singles group, you have just a lot of weird dynamics sometimes. They're fun and stuff like that, but it can get weird sometimes, right? So now after the series for the singles, everyone is realizing that they need to be open to feedback. They need to help one another, even help their leader meet his or her core emotional needs. So it's been really great in terms of the dynamics of the singles Bible talks as well. So it's been amazing how we can tweak it in different ways, even for a church of a size of 1,000. Amen.
All right, I'm Larry Craig, and this is my wife, Mary Lou, and we are in the ministry, and I serve as an elder in the New York City church. And we do have about 3,000 members. We're going to talk about the good enough parenting aspect of this for a moment. GEP, I don't want to assume that you're familiar with this. I say GEP, and people say, what does that mean? This is a program that John and Karen have developed over the years involving the movie therapy, involving a lot of research. And it is fundamentally about being a good enough parent, knowing that we're not going to be perfect parents. And they have the premise that we have our children, and actually all of us have 5 core emotional needs, and connection and acceptance, healthy autonomy, reasonable limits, realistic expectations, spiritual values, and community. And that don't exasperate your children. Ephesians 6, there are about 8 ways, among probably other ways, but some patterns of how we can exasperate our children. For us, we have been doing parenting things for a long time. We have very grown children who have given us 9 grandchildren, ages 15 down to 2, so we're kind of on even the next generation of all of this. But we became aware in the New York City church that we were not reaching enough of our own kids. And we've had a lot of dialogue with John. John, at the time, was coming to New York often for his continuing training and education. And that dialogue led to, in the summer of 2012, following the World Discipleship Summit, John and Karen came to New York, and about 70 of us took their training. Most of the staff, a lot of people who work with teens, most of our young staff, campus ministry couples, youth and family workers. It was very interesting because we had an intensive 4 days. There were several sets of parents and children taking the training, including us and our grown daughter in her 30s with 3 children. And that was very interesting. She was hearing all this. About every other break, I went back and said, Holly, are we okay? If you need to say anything to me, are we okay? But we made it through that great. But the implementation, we are very, very excited about what we've seen in the New York church in focusing on parenting, and that's the aspect we've focused on. We are a large church. We have 11 regions. All of our regions have taught GEP now. Wow. Very encouraging in different ways. Some have done midweeks for a while. Some have done midweeks 2 weeks in a row, the same thing, so they could split the church up in half so people could babysit other children. We're in a large region of 600 people. We spent a lot of time getting everybody's small groups reorganized. And I mean just about everybody but teens in campus. And that was challenging. The goal was to get all of the people who are parents of teens in small groups with other people who have teens. And all of the people who either were married empty nesters but had the smaller children, they're all in small groups because we realized the follow-up to this was going to be very significant. Amen. And so we taught it first in the spring of last year. It was challenging a little bit for me initially because I'm not very technologically, I'm kind of in the 90s maybe. So I got to learn to do the movie therapy, and some of my friends that know me are laughing, and the PowerPoint and all that. But it was very intense. We spent 9 weeks, 2 hours every Friday night with all the parents of teens in our region, which was a couple of hundred. And we would come, and from 7:30 to 9, we would present the material, and then we would break up into small groups for half an hour and have some directed discussion about the material. And then those discussions would continue. It was very exciting to see the transformation in our families. We started with the teens first because that's kind of the 911 place. And then after the summer, we went back and did the same thing with the parents of younger children. 9 weeks. And now the follow-up has been, particularly with the teen parents, we work with the youth and family ministry in our region and somewhat throughout the church. Now we have a Friday night a month where instead of going to the midweek groups, all the teens and their parents come together. We have a devotional. Sometimes we're split up. Sometimes we're together. Sometimes it's interactive. We've done a lot of different things in following up and helping the parents and their kids get connected. And I'll just say the benefits have been amazing in a lot of areas. Even evangelistically, we've had a lot of visitors come. I will say we purchased this book, which was really expensive because we had to have it shipped from here. But we purchased this book, 1 per couple for everybody in our region. We sold them to the visitors who came at a discounted rate. I kept making sure people know this is a discount. The book is awesome. The book is difficult if you haven't taken the course, I think. I think when you take the course, it's awesome. If John hears this, no offense, John, but this is just but this really backed up the course, and I think parenting is a felt need all over the world. And it's a challenge all over the world. And we had a couple come she'd been a disciple 14 years. One son grew up, left. One who was about 22, became a Christian. They had a younger son. The husband came to church every once in a while. Not very interested, but she persuaded him to come to the Good Enough Parenting with her, and he came every week. And it changed his heart, and 3 to 4 months later, he became a Christian. He really turned himself in, because the thing that convicted him, he was a very successful businessman who had no time for his children, and that just so rocked his world. And we've seen some families transform, being put back together. It was interesting because every week I'd give us some victory stories from the week, and moms would say, we were in the car and I just had to bite my tongue when I wanted to say something, and the child would say, Mom, you've been going to that course, haven't you? So it's been very, very rewarding.
Yeah. And I just wanted to share a little bit about how this is different from what we've been doing for years in one way, but it's very much similar in another way. We've been teaching parenting classes for many years, and the subject matter is very much the same. We would talk about being a good example and consistent discipline and having age-appropriate awareness and connecting emotionally and making sure you're teaching your children spiritually in a structured way. And but what is so effective about this program, I think, is that you spend a good chunk of time on each component, and you have good discussion about it, and then it's built in some follow-up to help each other really put it into practice, rather than a couple hours once a year on parenting or something like that. And also, there's a lot of weight given to the truths that are in the Bible from all the research that's included in this program, and so that usually research always ends up showing how the Bible is true after all, and so but there's a lot of research involved. And also something new I think that this brings is it shows the exasperating interactions that we as parents are having sometimes that we're not aware of at all, and our parents are shocked, and they're very grateful to see these things. And also, I think the introduction of the cartoons makes it a lighthearted way to see yourself more clearly. And sometimes it's hard to see yourself, but when it's in a cute little cartoon and you think, wow, that's me. Yeah. And then, like Laura said, the movies are so impacting because you have professional actors acting out real life scenarios, and so you see yourself clearly up there. You see the destruction that might be happening in your home, or you see the joy and the connection that could be there. And so that's very impacting. And then one other thing that is added is the discussion with other parents. Parents that are going through the same thing that you are. And so you get to see that you're not the only one, and also you get a lot of good input from them, and you create bonds that last for years to come.
Thank you. Now you might ask yourself, all right, does it work? That's the question I asked myself about 4.5 years ago. As I wasn't interested in the fad, I wanted to know, does it work? Does it really produce something? And I'm here to tell you that in my personal life, it has. As was shared when we went through the class, I called my children and apologized right away for the things that I did that I recalled that affected them in a negative way. Thank God they didn't remember them, but I did, and I felt responsible for them. In our church, when I went back after the training, people were a little cautious. What's this new thing? Is it Mike going to take us in a different direction and so forth? And so I put together a 7-week series on why do I behave the way I do. And every Sunday, I used a different life trap and expanded on it in the sermon. During a series, I had a visitor come up, a young man, or actually a young man, he's in his 30s or 40s, came up to me with tears in his eyes, crying because of the clips and because of the information that was handed out. He pointed to the screen and he said, "Mike, that's my life." Now, he came from an alcoholic background, both his father and himself, which I don't have. And I can't relate to that. I've read it, I've studied it, but I've never lived it. He's lived it. He saw a 1.5-minute clip on a screen, and it brought him back to that life experience that I had no contact or experience with. He studied the Bible and got baptized. Amen. And then his 2 twin sons. He was divorced, and his 2 twin sons, not twin sons, his 2 teen sons, they also got baptized. Wow. And I attribute it to the impact that the Life Trap teaching, the movie clips, the personal sharing affected his life. Thank God, as God would have it, about 3 years later, he was married for the second time to a disciple, a woman who loves him deeply and cares much about him. Amen. The other thing that we discovered, as we did the I Choose Us for the marriages, in our church, we had visitors come. And we had a couple who came who, through I Choose Us, building relationships, learning, this is over about a 6-week period of midweeks, they too studied the Bible and they were baptized into Christ. You say, well, does this help your church? My personal opinion is absolutely. Amen. You see, in the world, the one thing we have in common with everybody in the world, whether they're atheists, whether there's some other religion, whether they don't believe anything at all, is marriage and parenting relationships. Whether you're rich or poor, it doesn't matter. You have relationships with your spouse and your children. And if you have any kind of heart, your desire is to have a great relationship both with your spouse and your children. But oftentimes we don't know how to do that because the only models we have are the parents and the grandparents that went before us. And sometimes they're great, sometimes they're not. Yeah. And so I'm convinced, and I'm probably one of the more cautious people in the room, I'm convinced that this works and is needed not just in our churches, but really outside of our churches and around the world. Amen. So you've got a great panel of experts in front of you, and so we want to turn the microphone over to you. And we want to help you by answering any questions that you may have that we can address this morning before you leave. So the floor is open. You raise your hand, and you feel free to ask any question you want, and we'll do our best to answer them for you. Yes, sir.
Sir. Yes, bro.
Oh, yes.
My name is David. I'm from Myanmar, and our church is about 76, and half of them are married. And I've attended the movie therapy class even before the book was being published. But my question is, how can I help the marriage in my in our church to teach this, because it's in English and we are non-English speakers. At the same time, the movies that produced by Hollywood is really good, but they have to understand the word as well. Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit challenging. But I know that we can use our own movies. Mm-hmm. But in our movies, it's different. Mm-hmm. It's not as effective as the Hollywood movies.
Sure.
So, and that's one thing. And then, although I attended the movie therapy class and I got a certificate to teach, I haven't attended this GEP, Good Enough Parenting. Yeah. So I know it helped me a lot when I attended the class, but how could I help the other marriages in my church, in our church?
Awesome. Great. Thank you. Great question. So the question, as I understand it, is how can I take I Choose Us or Good Enough Parenting and utilize it in a great way to help the marriages in our church, especially if they're non-English speaking or other language churches. How can we help them? Is that the question?
That's
pretty much?
And I know that I'm not, I didn't attend the Good Enough Parenting class.
Okay.
So I cannot teach them.
Right.
So,
Right.
Yeah. Does anyone help other churches in teaching that? I know it's a long period of time to.
Sure, we can talk about even how to do that. That might be a better conversation afterwards, but we can try to address that with you. Okay, panel of experts.
I think dialogue and perhaps talking to John and the people here with some ideas, because I know he's definitely trying to get this around to help everybody. You know, you may know from here more.
So we have a Chinese ministry that also doesn't understand many of these English movies, and even the English speaking, they don't get some of the jokes in these Hollywood shows. So we localize it. We get Singapore productions, and some of them are not as good, but it's still effective. And we've even used movies that's not Singaporean or Chinese, and we've used Korean movies, Japanese movies with the subtitles. And so these are some things you can do, source around for other Asian movies, because culturally at least it's more similar to the Myanmar church, and just make sure you have somebody that can do subtitles, and I think you can have the effect over there. Our brother CK over there produces movies, so you could hire him to go to Myanmar and make a movie for you. But that's something that has helped. When the Chinese ministry did the Good Enough parenting program this year, it's the same thing. It's very powerful. Even if the movies may not be as good, as high quality, but it still gets the emotional effect. I think regardless about culture, we still have that effect. So I think you just go for it.
Yeah. Awesome. Randy?
Got nothing to add. That's great.
Yeah. I'm sure with the slides, you're able to translate them into your native language. Because you can do that, edit them and work it that way. So, amen. Anybody else? Another question? Yes.
You mentioned that there's a program and a book. What's the difference? Or do we have access to the program, or do you just have to go find a class to go to?
Sure, I can take that. There's a book that John and Karen wrote. One is called I Choose Us, which is for the married approach. And one is called Good Enough Parenting, which is for parenting, obviously. And then so those books are available to anybody. I know in the States you can buy it on Amazon.com. It's a public book available to people based on inventory. Then there's a presentation, and that's where one has to go get trained on understanding the principles behind it, understanding the material, and then they receive from John or a trainer. They receive the presentation, the PowerPoint presentation, to be able to use. They do have to learn how to edit movies, which is not that complicated after a while. But great question. Yes, sir. Yes, brother.
Thank you. I didn't think I was that old. I have a question, and when you're breaking your groups down, preteens, teens. Well, do you have anyone that's got a 24-year-old and a 10 and an 8-year-old? Because that's a very real for us. I mean, if I talk to my son who's 24, he's probably going to talk about bad enough parenting, but then I also have an 8 and 11-year-old, and so how have you functioned? What resources do you have for those of us that we're not exactly empty nesters? We're going around it a second time, I guess.
Okay. All right. So, in a sense, what I'm hearing you say is there an aspect of the program that can help families that have a wide range of children?
Exactly what I'm asking.
Okay. So we'll give to you guys.
What we encouraged families to do was to, if they had a teen or a young teen, to go to that section because that was more urgent. And then in the fall, we did the parents of the preteens on down. But it's all the same material. It's the same life traps that you may have. It's the same core needs that they have. They're just kind of at a different stage. And so, like Pwahi mentioned that they emphasize different things according to the age. But what I found was that with my daughter, my adult children, I found myself thinking, now how have my life traps, how have they affected me and my communication even now with my adult children? And that really helped me a lot even now, and now with the grandchildren coming along, it's helping me, even though they're not my kids, but any interactions I have with them, I want to make sure that I'm considering these core needs. Does that answer your question? Okay.
We have a 24-year-old who just came home after graduating from college. The economy in the U.S. is not so hot. There's a lot of, like 80% in this age group, for whatever reason. We were empty nesters for about a year. It was awesome. The nest is not empty anymore. A 24 and a 21-year-old have returned home, and that's okay. We love it. And the strange thing is, while we're presenting Good Enough Parenting for half the Annapolis bunch, they're repeating it now for the singles there. And so you can imagine the things we're talking about at home. Okay, and there's gaps in my parenting. There's areas where I didn't do so hot, and I get a second chance now. Mm-hmm. Okay, so just because you got, and again, the needs are the same. They manifest themselves differently at different ages. We all have those same needs. And so being able to, go through a Good Enough Parenting for yourself and then to turn around and be able to present it to others, that's a powerful thing. So don't think that just because you got a 24-year-old and an 8-year-old that it's all that different.
Or do you want to say something? Yeah, one thing I would throw out to you guys, all of us, is that in our church, we the problems become very evident with the teenagers. Yeah. And so we address that. Then we realize that it'd be better to be more proactive. Amen. with parents of younger children, so as they get to the teen years, they might not be repeating the same issues that other teenagers have had. So in my mind, the brilliance of it is it works for any age group. But it's an incredible tool for families that either have young children or are planning on having children, although they may not have any at the moment, so that they're able to be far ahead of the curve on their parenting than trying to catch up with things that they realized that maybe they did wrong or wish they could do better. Make sense? Yeah. So wherever church you're from, if that's not happening, I'd encourage you to go back and say, let's get them when they're 1 year old. So when they're 13 and 16 and 18, they've got a great foundation rather than playing catch up. Okay? Another question. Yeah, go ahead.
This is one of the things that's really unique about Good Enough Parenting. In fact, Dr. Jeffrey Young, who is the godfather of schema therapy, that is the model used throughout this, was blown away with what John came up with. He goes, now you've actually got something that can prevent life traps and schemas. So, if you want to be a good enough parent, you can actually, we've all got our stuff. Too late for us, right? But we have the opportunity to prevent those things from developing in our children.
Can I add something to that? Randy said, too late for us, and he's kidding, because, the life traps and the schemas, and you guys will understand a little bit more about that when you go through the program if you haven't done so already. But these negative thought patterns, they can be changed at any age. Mm-hmm. And there's hope for every parent out there to not hand down these life traps to their kids, which is typically what happens. You have a life trap, you end up handing it down to your kids. And so you're growing, your kids are growing, your ministry's growing, everyone's growing together. And that's why I think this program is so dynamic.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yes, sister.
Yes. I have a question. Just so you guys know, just a comment. Good Enough Parenting is on Amazon for $10. And it's a lot cheaper.
They have it here today too, I think.
Oh, they do?
For $10?
Okay.
Not for $10.
Well, yeah.
So they have them here for $10. I am going to buy a whole bunch of them. But I'll take them back to the States and ask you not to tell anybody how much I paid for
We
it.
suggested that to our congregation just because the book was so expensive. So if you're doing it, you can also suggest the e-copies. It's a lot cheaper.
Yeah, yeah.
One thing that I wanted to ask of the panel or anyone out here is if you've had success with bringing GEP to the secular world or the business world. My husband and I have done it several times. People love it, of course. My daughter goes to like a small kind of a charter private school, and they encourage the parents to bring their talents to, you know, if you want to teach a class or start a club. And so my husband and I are really thinking about, you know, getting with the principal and talking to him about presenting this for the parents of the school. And the school community is very tight, it's small, and I wanted to see if anybody had ever done it for a business or a school, and if they had any advice about that.
Great question. Has anybody used GEP in a secular world, secular setting, and making something of it?
Like as an evangelistic.
Sure, absolutely. We have not yet, but that's where we're going. We've actually created our own website for that purpose. And so John and Karen's book in the U.S. has been approved by the U.S. government as a resource for parenting. And they're working on a secular version of it as well. So it's more, you know, available, if you will, to the secular world. But what we're doing is what we have created called solutionparenting.com. And it removes the, you know, I'm a minister of the church, those kind of things. And I'm viewed more as a trainer in parenting and in marriage. And so we're going and presenting it that way. And probably starting for us in the PTA organizations, parent-teacher organizations. And then once we get it, the way it works in our area, once you get in one and word spreads, then you have a chance to get in many others. But there's children's clubs, there's Boy Scouts, there's so many areas that we can tap into, including other churches that would embrace this kind of information because they want help with their parenting too. And if you guys have done anything in a secular, but I'm fired up about it personally because I'm viewing it as my ministry, a golden opportunity. Yes.
Yeah, as what Michael said, we're coming up with a secular version of the book, so that's definitely in the pipeline to actually bring it to the corporate and schools, because schools here in Singapore are very secular. Any hint of religion, they're not going to take it up. But people are excited about it. That's why there is a demand, and we had to do that. Hopefully they will learn these biblical principles so that they'll be more open to come to church next time.
Amen. I just wanted to add, I mean, the great thing we live in the South, in the United States, and so they don't mind the biblical part of it. They're like, oh yeah. I mean, everybody claims to be a Christian anyway. So it kind of helps. You know, they don't mind that part, so that's cool.
Yeah, awesome. Great. I live in New England, don't have the same experience at all. But I do think there's a real attractiveness to it, and we're approaching it with, instead of the biblical passage, it'll be principle number 1, principle number 2, and you can use the principle from the passage that is absolutely true and workable and relatable to people. Yes, brother.
Yeah, I'm from India, Bangalore. I think Dr. Ashok did I Choose Us, and they poured their heart, and even Dinesh Saijus did, and even Good Enough Parenting they did, and we attended. And I have 2 questions. One, in I Choose Us, I identified the life traps. And the topmost ones also I identified and did that exercise and found. But there are some patterns are not able to come out of. Like definitely one of the exercise they gave was to memorize scriptures and try and work. But it is so strong, the negative effects and all those things. It is so strong that it's very tough to come out. So do you all have any solutions? That's my question one. And the second one is, we don't want our son, me and Celine are married for 14 years now. My son is 13. And we are looking, in him. But the damages which already we caused, we are trying to, bring him out. But now we are trying to, remove, kind of not infuse new traps in him. So any inputs on those 2?
Okay. Anybody?
I think I really appreciate your vulnerability, by the way. That was great to hear. I mean, I just want to give you a lot of encouragement that it's never too late. You know, there have been so many much older singles that we've worked with that have come through really, really hard times, and they are changing. And, you know, so I think the resources you have available are, you know, of course, in the kingdom, counseling. You can do it as a family, or he may want it, you know, separately. We have the, you know, through Disciples Today, the program, what's it called? We're the network of counselors that you can get. You can Skype with those counselors.
Disciples Today.
Yes, and then there's for people who are older, there's Celebrate Recovery. There's other different programs going on that are great healing resources. And so maybe what we could do is get you in touch with some different healing resources, and you can just kind of go through them and see what works best for you. But it's never too late to change. Some of the we've had just incredible stories of people who've kind of used this as a springboard. So they've realized, oh my goodness, I didn't even know I had all these things going on in my heart and my life. And so what they've done is they've reached out and to other people, and they've gone and started this journey. And we've been getting back just such positive, you know, information from people who are making these changes. They're taking these huge strides, and their lives are changing drastically. So hope that helps.
And I remember John Louis, when he was teaching his workshop, saying that his own life traps, he was just encouraged to be lessening them every year, you know, that they can grow less and less. And I thought that was very encouraging, because and there was a very outstanding brother who shared during the delegate meetings about something that he struggles with every day. But it's, you know, it's getting less and less. And so that's where the Spirit of God helps us. But I think our sinful nature keeps us humble, and we keep having victories, but you're not alone.
Yeah, I would say two things, then we'll wrap up. One is that there's nothing that is impossible for our God, which means that he can change anything in our lives that he wants to.
Right.
Paul, being an apostle, prayed that God would remove this thorn, and yet he realized that God said, no, my grace is sufficient for you, Paul, and you're going to have to continue to fight this battle and keep working through whatever it was that Paul was working through. In my life, I feel like I have made progress in my life traps, but I have certainly not gotten rid of them as if they no longer exist in my life. The value for me that I see is I am better able to recognize now when that life trap is being triggered and not sinfully react to it like I would have 5 or 6 years ago. You follow me? 5 or 6 years ago, it would have been triggered, and I would have responded sinfully. Now it gets triggered, and I'm able to train myself to recognize, I know what it is. It's not Laura saying something to me. It's this feeling of failure that is triggering. So that's what I have to address. Not Laura, me. And it's helping me mature as I believe God intended for all of us to mature. So he's not going to take away everything in our lives, because if he did that, we'd probably become so prideful and so arrogant, and even to the point of being convinced that we didn't need him. And so I believe he's going to let some of those things rest with us, but we're able to become aware of them and grow in spite of those things to glorify him. We appreciate your attention. Thank you so much for coming out. We hope this helps. We'll stay around for a few minutes. If you have any questions or comments, we're more than happy to help out in any way we can. If not, go and enjoy a great lunch. Thank you.